What's up, everyone? Today we're going small, and I'm going to be working on these three Mame Junipers. Well, in case you can't tell, this one is the oldest of the three. And this was actually the first one that I ever exhibited out of the first batch of Mame Junipers that I made. And it's gotten kind of overgrown, so I'm going to see what I can do going in here and reducing this foliage mass to probably about half or even less than half of what is here. And you know, since I've let it grow out a little bit, the trunk has actually gotten bigger, and I keep looking at this side, thinking to myself that the base actually looks wider, but then I lose this really super cool twist that I got in here. This one has been in this container since last winter, so just about 6 months, and it's only 3 years old and already got some good character to it, but it's still got probably another year to go before I can put some sort of a crown on it. And I've wired a bunch of things. And then this is kind of where they all start. So the first problem with wiring this is that basically it's too deep in the container. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get this junction with the roots a little bit higher so that when I bend things, I don't run into the side of the container. I'm just going to pull it out, throw a little soil under it, and then put it back in the same container. All right, so as I've done before on a lot of other junipers, I am going to just take a knife and strip the bark off of about one side of this juniper, starting at the top and heading down. And this is going to allow me to create some more interest in the trunk. So right now that's a straight shari on the trunk. I'm going to go a little bit lower. And then I'm going to take the wire, wrap it around, and give it a twist. Now, if you know anything about wiring, you're probably wondering why I put those two loops together so close. But what I found in wiring Kishu is that this kind of a junction here will split when you bend it. And so I have a tendency to put a coil of wire kind of bracketing those two things to prevent them from splitting as I bend and twist this once I've got the wire all the way on. Whenever you come to a junction, I generally just pick the larger of the two, and if they are equal size, just pick one. Now you notice I left a little loop right there. That's basically so that the wire and the tip of the juniper can't separate. It's not super tight, so the juniper could still kind of pull itself out through there as I bend, but it's better than just ending the wire on a loose coil. All right, so our shari is here on the underside, and really what I'd like to do is get kind of a full turn in it. So I'm gonna bend this. One of the things you have to be concerned about as you do this, obviously, is too much splitting in the bark or the wood, but no pain, no gain. If I had 100 straight junipers, I wouldn't want any of them, so I'd rather face a few losses than end up with something that's completely straight and uninteresting. So the shari is starting right there, and I only got around about a quarter turn. Let me give it a little bit more twist. Yeah, so that's like a half turn. You can see I kind of split off some of the bark here, so hopefully I didn't split it all and there's actually some lifeline left. That's kind of the hazards of working with these guys. And some time of year, like, so it's early summer right now, and it's a decent time of year to be working on them. But in spring, this will separate really easily. So that's it for that one for today, and I'm going to set it aside to grow, hopefully, not to die, and revisit it in a few months. So for this one, like I said earlier, I repotted it last winter, and I've done some shari work here, and it hasn't really started to roll over. So I haven't removed any of the strong tips, and I'm not going to do much to it today. But I did come back and put some wire on some of these small branches just to add some movement so that it wasn't just like giant spikes of foliage. Obviously, this one's a decent size, but I also haven't started cutting it back. And in order to get it to tighten up, I would need to take off some of these long tips, and then it would start to create more of a bushy pattern here, which ultimately is kind of how to get them to become something that looks like a bonsai. But I feel like this one's not quite ready yet because the cambium hasn't started to roll back over here, so it might be another 6 months or a year before that's really starting to look like a Mame Juniper that actually looks like a bonsai. So if I measure this, I think that I'm well over the limit for Mame. 5.5 inches. And almost as wide. So let's see if we can bring this back down. Well, actually that was, no, it's not 5.5 inches. It's 3.5, or 4, because the pot is 1.5 inches tall. But in any case, it's too big. And I probably should have cut this back maybe even last fall, or thinned it out over the winter and wired it. And if I flip it over here, you can kind of see in the history of where the wiring ends. So here's the wire, the end of the wire, and then it's got probably 1.5 inches of growth. So it looks like it's grown probably about 1 inch. Usually when I wire, the wire doesn't go all the way out to the tips. It would only go out to a junction like this. So it's grown like 1 inch to 1.5 inches in every direction. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take off all the old wire and then do a little bit of branch analysis to see how I can compact this. And that might mean, taking off a whole branch like this, which if I flip this back over, makes up like this whole part of the tree. And so if I just cut that whole branch off and then bend some of these branches down or bring this around, that does compact the tree, but it also causes the problem that the branches are now coming from a different place. And so this lifeline that I have here that's so interesting and kind of important to the composition might be lost. So I have to look at those types of things really carefully, and maybe what I'll end up doing is cutting off some of this long growth in favor of some of these shorter tips that are back here. Sometimes sort of kind of like decandling a pine tree, if I cut everything back reasonably hard, removing like 75% of the growth, then all of these interior tips that are sort of not strongly growing but still there, those might step up and start to bush out. If you never thought you'd use 22 gauge copper, then you weren't making Mame. All right, so if I didn't miss anything, I've got all the wire off of here, and I've also gone in and cleaned up a few stubs that would just be in the way. And now I have to make some actual decisions about how I'm going to modify the structure of this or just prune it back. Now, with most Kishu, I don't have a tendency to just sort of trim back branches. I tend to move clumps of foliage around in favor of removing longer branches. But that's, like I said earlier, not going to work on this one. So I'm going to spend a few minutes kind of contemplating this and then start trimming. There's another piece of wire. All right, nothing left to do but just kind of go for it. Of course, going for it requires a long recovery. All right, well, I'm going to say that's about 75 or 80% of the foliage. So now it's time to do some fine wiring and maybe a little bit more shari. Let's take a look. When I'm doing this, I have to reach around the camera. Okay, got most of these wired, so I'm gonna do some bending. All right, well, I think that's about as good as I'm going to do for right now as I adjust this again. But the idea here is to just really reduce the foliage quite a bit, and Mame is really kind of an exercise in minimalism. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the tree to make more compact growth. And by doing a hard cutback like this, where I take off 75–80% of the foliage, the tree is much more likely to send out some buds from some of these branch junctions that are up here and tight. And so I'll put this back out on the bench, or rather in the tray, to grow for a little while. Hopefully it won't go juvenile, but that's always a possibility when you do a lot of cutting. I did leave a few, strong tips over here. Not as many up in here, but I think that will help it to just continue growing, and hopefully with those continuing to extend and then getting some back budding, I'll be able to compact this again further. But if not, maybe it'll make a good showing. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. I don't get a chance to trim back, I guess, mature Mame bonsai that much, but that was kind of fun. If you want to pick up a couple of teeny little junipers, check out bonsaify.com. And if you have experience working with Mame and trimming back junipers, share it in the comments below. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.